Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here, and my partner Jackie Stuck out in Denmark. I'm in Dallas, and today we're having a webinar on basically doing some advanced web scraping and troubleshooting. So actually, if anyone here actually in the call, if you have any that you've been having trouble with, let me give us a link to it, especially if you can have it's like a public URL. Plan to give us that link here in a bit, and we can work on it because we don't have a lot to cover today. But we're hoping maybe some of you guys have some issues that you were trying to solve and we can play with it. Or we can just talk about, hey, how could you do some advanced stuff, even if you're new to web scraping, how you can use it other than just, as Jackie was just talking about, filling out a form, right? But I often use it for when I was working in the corporate office, grabbing data from one system and dumping it into the other system, right? It's super helpful that most things nowadays use a web browser. And so it's a great tool to have in your tool. I think if I was to say if you should learn one thing with AutoHotkey, other than a simple thing like hot strings, because it's just so easy, I would say web scraping would be the one that like you get the most bang for the buck for studying it. Granted, it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah, it might be a steep learning curve, just like you said, Joe, but still, I feel like because that was one of the first things I actually set up and attempted to learn quite quickly, because most of what I was doing was actually on a web page. And it actually turned out that over time, I ended up finding out that all of these web page information was being fed by a REST API. So
yeah,
because of that, I had a full understanding. This is over maybe a span of a year, but at the end, I had a full understanding of all of the information that the API was providing. So to actually set up the calls that was needed to the server to get the information that I needed, I had learned all of that from actually automating the web page. So setting up those few HTTP calls to actually fetch the same information was maybe not a piece of cake, but at least at the time it was much simpler than if I had attacked that first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually the APIs are also, it's more, I think it's because of my nature is like I love data, right? But if you work in a company that you access a lot of stuff and they have an API, it's crazy what you can do with an API. It's so easy to once you get past the OAuth, the authentication type of stuff, which for me is sometimes a headache. But often in 5 minutes, I'm actually working with the API and doing queries and pulling back exactly what I want in a structured format. And it's so much cleaner than web scraping and faster and less data. And anyway, it's one of my favorite webinars we did on APIs. So if you haven't checked that out.
Yeah, the funny thing with web scraping is that you kind of feel like you're working with organized data, but you ain't really, because the way people build websites and stuff varies so much. So even though everything is within some kind of HTML standard or stuff, all of these style sheets and the way that people use extra libraries to actually build these web pages, WordPress, whatever, Android, lots and lots, Rails and all of that stuff, which actually builds the actual HTML code differently, but the information from the server is just about the same. So, yeah.
And to clarify, so also we're getting a little off topic, but an API call, web scraping is an API. Your browser is doing an API call to that server, which is what Jackie mentioned a couple minutes ago. The other thing I loved you said, Jackie, was like you feel like you're working with structured data, but you're not really. And everything you just said, what I was going to add on to it too is people just might change their website and change how they lay out the page, right? Which of course can happen in API data, but it's super rare, right? Usually they don't change the structure of the data. They might get rid of an endpoint and add a new version or something, but the data structure stays pretty consistent. So it's got some great pluses to it, and it's more secure. But the volume and the speed and everything, there's a lot of great pluses to it compared to web scraping. Having said that, often I love to just be doing something at work, be on a browser, and either fill out something on the page or grab something from it, and it's amazing how often that it happens. So often it's ridiculous how helpful it is.
Yeah, but my point, I don't know exactly what it was, but maybe what I'm thinking right now is that to do web scraping well enough, let's put it like that, you need to learn this much. But when you get there, it becomes pretty easy to use it on almost any website. And to do APIs, you might only need to know this much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've learned a little bit more than you needed. So
Yeah.
this seems very, maybe not easy, but it at least seems simpler when you start doing that.
Yeah. And again, I'd say the caution that it's the OAuth stuff, depending on the API you're connecting to, can be a pain. But generally speaking, you're absolutely right. API stuff it's very straightforward. Oh, actually, you know what? I just realized I don't have to log in with IE in this. So, sorry, let's go ahead and move forward here. There's 17 of us registered. As I said, like just re-register because I think everyone here, maybe there are a couple names I didn't recognize, but I was just sending it to basically everyone who had registered to a few back. And we start off muted. You can unmute yourself if you have a question. It's just because if we get too many people talking, it gets overwhelming. But if you have a question, use the chat or raise your hand. There's a little button somewhere you can raise your hand, which I'm not sure where I'd even see that. So I wouldn't recommend you raise your hand. I'd type something in the chat, or just unmute yourself and chime in. We found now like most people don't unmute themselves, so it's not a concern of ours. We just didn't want to have everyone talking over each other. All right. So first we start off with just a script to highlight. And this is just my example of something I just did the other day, and it's my stupid simple web scraping where I'm not actually using the DOM or COM or anything. Let me start Chrome here, and let me get to that. Actually, let me borrow that. I'll have to log in, but this will get me to the page I need to go to. And what I had to do is, it's easier if I demonstrate it, is in this page, and this isn't the actual survey, so I'm just using a plugin. But see how in everything in here it says like AutoHotkey, : and then it says, what do you like best? And then Python, : what do you like best? So I don't want this, I call this part the stem, even though it's at the backside. And this part is the leaf. It's actually the part that changes. And I don't want everything to the right of this : in my answer. Right, but this tool, Survey Gizmo, dumps it in there automatically, and so it was really annoying. I'm like, oh, I got to come through and hit delete, and there's no. I was like, why can't I do a search replace in a browser? Like it doesn't have one. Years ago, I know Firefox had one, but I tried having a plugin, it didn't work. But then I said, you know what? Let me do something here in Survey Gizmo. Survey Gizmo in AutoHotkey, and so I wrote this one, which is just, I say send Control A, right? So select all, then let it sleep a little bit, and then send Control C to copy, and then sleep a little bit. And then basically I take the clipboard and I use stir split to parse it on the semicolon. And basically I say .1, so this will get everything to the left of it. And so it just replaces what was in the clipboard it stores what was in the clipboard with everything to the left of that. And then I send it back with, this will paste it. And then I add a little sleep. And then I counted in here, I said, okay, if I hit tab, oh, look, I'm back on the next one, right? I could have dumped this into a loop, but the problem is I don't always know how many are gonna be in this group because then they change, right? So let me go ahead, and then what I did, I liked it so much, I said, you know what? I can actually do all of this in SPSS, and it's just a little different. And there I can use the down arrow instead of tabbing 4 times. So this is basically the same thing. I could have structured it differently. But again, I wrote this one in like, a minute or 2 minutes. And so let me run it. Watch it not work. So I'll come in here. I'm going to hit the hotkey. And I did it and move me to the next one. And I can just hit it again. Oh, look, it's going through. Great. Right. And I don't have to worry about it. And so it was stupid simple. It's, I guess, quote unquote, web scraping. I'd make fun of myself if I saw this, but I'm like, you know what? It took me a minute to do it, and it worked. It worked very reliably. I haven't had one time where it didn't work. I could have put something in there to say, wait for the clipboard to be filled and do this and that, but that wasn't. I didn't care, right? I just wanted something quick and easy.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the places where people, when they start out, would probably do something that was way more involved than these 8 lines of code, and when they then refine it, actually end up with something like you have here. And depending on the response time of whatever program or browser or whatever, they might need more sleeps, or they might need to check the clipboard for content and stuff like that. But yeah, this is a good piece of simple to use code.
And I just wanted to demonstrate it because it's one of those things that, like, you know, obviously you're not going to be doing this in Survey Gizmo, right? The odds of that are pretty darn small. But you might have something similar where you have to go through and check each of these boxes. So like here, I could say, let me check it, and tab, 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 tab. Oh, hit spacebar. Tab, 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 spacebar, right? And then just write that into a loop, right? Yeah. And you could go through and, you know, and deselect like 5 at a time if that's what you want it to do. It's a super easy way to interact with a web page, yet it's not using. I can use it in Chrome. Actually, sometimes when I've done this, Chrome and Firefox and IE, they actually, I don't understand why, but like a tab isn't the same in those browsers, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't line up perfectly.
Yeah, just like backspace actually doesn't get you back in Chrome. Yeah. I would.
All right, so
stuff like that.
So that was the first little silly example. Let me exit out of it. Save that. Close it. All right, now we're going to move on. Let's go on to our next slide here so I have a way to remember what in the world we're doing. So first, I need to put a hyperlink to it. But if you haven't watched our webinar on web scraping and you're new to web scraping, we have an intro to web scraping webinar, and I got, I don't know, like a dozen tutorials also. It's if you're new to it, it takes a while understanding the DOM, which is the Document Object Module, and COM, which is Microsoft's Component Object Module. Model? No, one's a model.
Model.
Right?
Model.
Yeah, I always.
They're both models. Yeah.
Model. Okay, I always want to say module. But the DOM is the structure of the web page, and COM is basically something from Microsoft that allows you to connect to IE. And so they're both, you know, you're not going to learn it in an hour. Let's put it that way. But they're good stuff. So the first one we're going to cover is often I'll load a page, and let's go to because I have an example of it here. And you know what? Let me go ahead and launch this script, and it's going to launch LinkedIn. And actually, you know what? Let me comment these out. I'll just get it up and running here. Oh, you know what? I didn't. Just in case. This one actually now. Is it running? Yeah. Here's my window. There it is. And now that I have it open, I'm just going to connect to that existence of it. I must have. All right. I'll just navigate. Come on. So on this page, notice how slow LinkedIn is, right? And I don't know if you noticed it, but this area right here, it wasn't loaded. It actually showed an area, but it didn't have anything in it at first. I mean, so I'm going to come in here with the IWB2 Learner tool and get this. And here I'm going to, oh, look, here's this class name. And that was actually that's what I've already done in here. And so let me go. Now, if I click this is going to navigate away from that page. All right. So now we're not on the page. We don't have that. You can see my 15,000 connections. I finally got 15,000. Anyway, so it's going to navigate back to it. But notice I'm not using the sleep here to wait for the page to finish loading. Right. I'm going to turn those back on, and actually I should have shown what the text says there. But when I launch this, actually, let me explain what it's doing. This is going to wait until this element length is well, actually, sorry, let me rephrase it. It's gonna keep looping until this length is at least 3, right? So it's going to come through and it's going to start off at being 0, and it keeps waiting. I happen to know there were 3 elements on that page, and so once it hits to 3, then it'll get past this line. And you know what I could have done was thrown in the tooltip.
When I'm looking at the line, something to me is a little off.
Yeah, what's up?
Just because you're saying as while no, it's just me. It's late, so it's fair enough. You're actually telling it to wait while the length is
Right.
lower than 3.
Yeah, no, I had it backwards when I first wrote it too.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So let me see here. Let me get this. So now we're not on that page. It's going to navigate to it. And then I'm not even waiting for the page to finish loading. I'm just going to say, hey, you know what, stay here until, and you'll see that the tooltip, if I remember right, it'll start off with 0, and then suddenly it'll turn to 3, and then it'll move forward. So let me save this, reload it, and run it. Oh, and that's the one. And Jackie, maybe you can help me understand this. I mean, I understand what it's doing. I just don't understand why. So let me go back to that other page. Come on. LinkedIn is so slow. It drives me nuts. So when you navigate to a new page, and I think in this line it starts before the navigation happens, and so I think what's happening is this starts working on the other page, and then the page changes. Yeah. And then it breaks like you just saw it there. So you have to have, I thought the 50 sleep was enough, but maybe it was 100. Maybe
you're asking for elements within the document, but the document isn't ready. Or page is ready. So yeah. So the while loop that you have commented out, the one while busy and ready state isn't for. When you just jump over that, the one below can't actually return anything because the web browser doesn't actually have a ready document, so of course it will fail.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll try this again. I thought I was doing some, but I guess I just had a long enough sleep where it would usually be there. So now, and then where's my tooltip? See how slow this thing drives me nuts. Yeah. Oh, and we didn't even see it. I never even saw the tooltip.
I think it flashed very.
Okay, so we got the 431 number that we were looking for. If you're getting an ID, like let's see on LinkedIn, I think up here. No, I thought there were some IDs. So if you're getting, oh, there we go. So if you're getting an ID, correct me if I'm, oh, that's already copied, I think. So this, while not that, so that actually would work on a ID. Is that right, Jackie? I think it'll wait for that ID to be found on the page before it moves forward. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to have the length, obviously, because there is no length on an ID, right? It's not an array, but that you can put that in, and it'll wait for that ID to be present before it tries to read it.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that make sense to everybody? Let's see if anyone said no. Cool. Okay, and then here's what. Let me go back to my. Where's my deck? Ooh, here we go. So, all right, we did that one. So the next one, there's 2 ways you can avoid having errors pop up like I saw there. So one actually is when you're getting it from an array. So let's work on that one first. So I used to let's change this one. Actually, we'll get rid of that. And we're just going to grab that page and let's see. Actually, this one I think I want to be 2 because they're 0 based. Am I on the right page? Oh, 1. Maybe it is 0. I guess it is 0. So 0 was the, yeah, duh, because that's what we saw. So that's the 431. Now, if this element didn't exist, if this wasn't here, this would actually cause an error, right? So the simple way, which is what I used to do all the time, was I would just put a try in front of this. Let's see if that still works. Yeah, it still worked. It's fine. But let's say this was like, I know there's, you know, let's make it break first. Let's put this at 5 because I'm pretty sure this was. So see how there's an error here? But if we put a try in front of this, oh, I'm running it. It's trying it, but it actually isn't even. I thought it would give me a blank message box, but
no. As soon as it fails, everything within the try block will of course not execute.
Okay. So that is one way. If you were scraping a lot of pages and like actually in LinkedIn, not that you should do this because it's against our policies, but if someone didn't have like the company or job title and it wasn't there, you don't want this message box coming up saying it failed getting it, right? So you could throw in a try. But what I learned the other day, I was talking to Maestria, the author of AutoHotkey Studio, which is what we're using here, and he really quickly glanced over it. But what he said was, if you put in .item, this will prevent it from failing. So now, actually, this one will give me the blank message box, I believe. Yeah. So obviously, we wouldn't have a message box if we're doing the scraping, but it allows you to basically try to access that point. But if it's not there, it doesn't error out. And so I had no idea that was actually a thing. So I started adding it now to my all my code. I'm like, why not, right? It's a little bit more wordy. But and Jackie, why don't you mention to me, because when I brought this up, you said I think you were getting to what you understood why that is.
Did I get to that? I'm not really sure I understand.
Well, you got close. Yeah, a lot closer than I did.
But yeah, of course, the item is something that's built in to the back end of this. So it probably has its own way of actually calling. And I believe it's the way that AutoHotkey has implemented the dot syntax and the way that the square brackets and stuff like that work. Just like we can't enumerate stuff that isn't actually a true AutoHotkey object. It's the same thing here. It's AutoHotkey actually making or fetching an item from an array that isn't actually there, and therefore AutoHotkey is failing. But when you actually ask the COM code to fetch an element from the array with COM code, it has its own built-in failure. So we don't get an AutoHotkey exception, and that's how I see it working. So by using the item, you're using whatever Microsoft or whoever built it, actually how they implemented it.
Oh, okay.
And by that, you're getting around that
right.
error.
Cool. Yeah, and by the way, this will work with tag name with. Name is also an array, right? It's just ID is the one that doesn't have, it's not an array, so it doesn't work with array. But but interesting enough, ID won't error out if it's not found. So you don't actually need something on when you're getting an ID. All right, so we covered both of those. Great. Okay, now for the fun one, event listeners, which sorry, I see. Hi, I'm assuming that I'm so sorry. Yes, it's a function Maestria uses for message box. I use it so much now I totally forgot that I was even calling it. So my apologies. That this M is a function that Maestria has built in. Well, it's in my library, and it's just a message box function. I like it because you can. Let's put this back to 0. Oops, 0. I can put in a comma here, and I can say, "Wow." And then I can put another comma, and then let's say I had another variable I was getting, I could dump it in here. I'm not gonna, well, all right, we'll say next line. So now when I run it, it puts each one of them on a separate line. And so it's an easy way if you're doing something and you have multiple lines, I like it for that purpose of it's super easy to force them to break on the new lines.
Okay, so the M function doesn't actually have a title or an options or anything like that?
I don't believe so. And that sure, it'd be surprised me if Maestria, he doesn't care about that kind of stuff. You know, he just wants to get to the data now. So I'd be surprised if he had that built into it.
Yeah, it's fair enough, but I had just seen it as a short way of writing message rushes, but fair enough. That it just takes an array, yeah, of unknown length, and then
Yep.
yes.
Yep. And so also I'll use it to put. He actually does a great job where he'll do this when he's because several times we will be grabbing data from something, and like the regex we're doing or something isn't right, and he'll put the thing in the middle, so he'll add this here, and then another one on the other side, and it's just an easier way to see what's actually. Oh, never mind. He puts it in the middle, but you get the idea. It's easy to see if there's something there that you weren't expecting. But yeah, it's a super easy one. All right, moving on to event listeners. So event listeners, and Jackie, I'd say it was like 2 years ago, I think. You helped me with this where for a long time, actually, I was doing some web scraping and there was never any issues. And then every once in a while I would come on a web page that I couldn't click. I could click, but nothing happened. And it was really, really annoying. So let me actually do an example here. So let's see. I think that's already, well, I'll just do it again. Let me exit out of this script. And this one, and Control V is what I have for going to that page. So this is the regular expression parser that I used to use until Jackie showed me the other one that actually uses the same exact syntax for AutoHotkey. The what is the not POSIX? What is the Perl?
regex 101, and it uses Perl, a specific version. I can't remember.
So in here, what I would do was, let's say I went and set this element here programmatically. So you know what? Let me do this. I come in here, and what is this one? Oh, look, it's got an ID. Great. So let me copy that. Oh, and I should have known because right here, right? Let me duplicate this in. So get on ID regex dot, and that'll be value. I know it's value because right here, this is value instead of inner text. Mm-hmm. And let's put it to :/s. I don't want, well, yeah, I'll get non-white space. Oh, and I'll get, all right. So now this, and let's get rid of the fire event first off. So this will set the value and then click there, right? And so it'd be like clicking in there. And so if I trigger this, you'll notice, let me move this out of the way, it's important. And it's so much more wonderful when it actually works. But I'm hitting the hotkey and it's not.
You ain't connected to the web page, are you?
Oh, you're so right. Thank you. There we go. So notice how it actually set the value there, but this is supposed to update. Now watch, actually, if I click in here, see how it updates and highlights all the non-spaces. So it didn't highlight the spaces, right? That's what the capital S is, the inverse of whatever the thing is. And so if I did this in lowercase, it would take the spaces. But it only works if I manually click in here. When I run my script, it sets it, but it doesn't actually click it.
Yeah. Even though you have the click function there, yeah. Yeah,
that's right. And typically what you do is you throw in like this click or maybe a fire event. And then there was there another one, or was that when the event listeners really came into being? I thought there was one other one that
like you have the on-click one here. There was some blur and some unfocus and different types of events you could try. But if the click one didn't work, most of the time you could be sure that none of it would.
Yeah. So Jackie spent it was I think at least a couple hours we were working through it, and finally came up with a solution for it. And then I added it to my my syntax writer. So let's see. Actually, now I still want to borrow this, but I will change it to a W, which actually would be pretty much the same as what that was, won't it? But it doesn't matter. And then I have my syntax writer running right now. So I'm going to say trigger action. Oh, sorry. Actually, let me rethink this. The question is, Jackie, what event do we have to trigger? Right? And that was the other, like, scratching your head, like, I don't know, right? Yeah. How do we know? So I found this tool, this visual event tool. It's a bookmarklet, and let's see, actually right here. Let me see. I think this will. Oh darn. I'll put the actual hyperlink to where you can get the bookmarklet. This goes to the GitHub thing, but I'll put it in here in a bit when we get back to it. But what it does is it highlights it, and then when I mouse over it, it'll show you there's a change, there's a key up and a mouse up event listener on this element.
Yeah.
And so this allows me to say, oh, you know what? I think I'll do the change, right? That makes the most sense to me. Actually, any of these make a lot of sense to me. But the change to me also, it's like, hey, there was a change, right? So that, but the key up, of course, you're done typing, something comes up and you mouse up, you've let go of the mouse. All three of those, I think, would probably trigger the effect we want. So now we can do that. The other thing we can do is with Chrome, but I'll show you in Chrome. It's a little trickier and not as good, but this visual event thing works pretty well. All right, so now I'm going to trigger a change event. So trigger action. Miscellaneous. So change. So what this did was this. And Jackie, you correct me if I'm wrong, right? Because you're the one that did all this, and I kind of applied it to other things. So it's going to create an event called change, which you can name it whatever in the world you want, right? Yeah. And then it initializes the change event. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then here, this is just a placeholder, so we need to basically point it to where we want that to trigger that change event.
Yeah.
And so now it's going to dispatch the change event on that element. Well, actually, yeah, on that ID. So when I run it, hopefully that actually did.
It did.
Okay. And let me put it back in here to say what? Let's do a comma. I don't know. There we go. I don't know why I'm getting like 80 messages here. But so that's for triggering a for that kind of an event. 55 minutes. Sorry. Apparently there's a grand communication scheme thing, something going on at the moment. Okay, whatever. I feel popular all of a sudden.
Yeah, it seems like you're getting there. Yeah.
So that's that, and that may have felt like I oversimplified that, but it because it is complicated. However, let me actually pull back up my menu here. So trigger action, and then so there's mouse events. There's a lot. There's actually more than what I have listed here. This is what I've built into my scraping tool or syntax writer. So there's mouse over, mouse down, mouse up, mouse click, mouse double click, keyboard events, miscellaneous stuff. If you don't have an event listener, which these are the ones, if you don't have an event listener, you can try just clicking a link or firing an event change or focusing there. But these, like this one, if you remember, Jackie, like for both of us, this one took us a while to get it to trigger. Yeah. And let me go ahead now and show in Chrome, in case you don't want to use this bookmarklet thing. I didn't see the equivalent in the developer tools in IE, but here you can say inspect. Let me move this out of the way. And then up over here, there's event listeners, and you'll see these. The thing is, these are on the page. It's not on that element. But if you actually play around with it, it does highlight it. So you can look at it and see where they are. It's just so like that's not on that element, which we didn't see in the other tool. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe
so
if you open the window one, if you try and open that one. Yeah, you have the window. Yeah, there under the handler. If you keep extending that tree to get to something that actually has to do with the element at one point. I'm not sure you will, but I'm just here.
This is where like it's just crazy how much stuff is in here. The other really annoying thing that when I was first trying to do this was I was like, hey, let me view the page source, right? And from there, I'll try to figure it out. Well, none of this is actually in the page source. At least it's not. I don't think it usually is. It's somehow maybe it's in like the JavaScript or something, but it's not in the actual HTML part. And it was really frustrating for me because I couldn't figure out what it was to actually trigger.
Yeah, the thing with most of these events that are hard, where you actually need to use the built-in event dispatch system and stuff like that, is the level at which the listener is implemented. Let's say it's jQuery or something like that, where it isn't actually the DOM listening for the event. And it would be if it was a normal JavaScript or something like that. But if it's something that you've built onto it, like Angular JS or something like that, where the way they've built their event listeners is just a little different, and it's listening at a higher level in the tree, so normal event bubbling might not work. So you get to a point where the click or the fire event or stuff like that actually doesn't trigger the behind the scenes code. So because it's only listening for the event in a specific way. And because a user isn't actually doing a click per se on the element, he's actually sending a message to the window that he performed a click at a specific spot. And that then bubbles in an event that then is dispatched to that element. And that's what the other code is actually listening for. And just to kind of say, it's not listening from the page up, it's listening from the user down. And so that's my guess as to what we are actually seeing the effect of. Where
I found, I think it was a lynda.com course straight up talking about event listeners. It was more about how and why you build them. And they talked, it was the vast majority was over my head. However, part of it was talking about what you said was like, they made it so flexible where the page didn't have to it was much easier to implement for a lot of specific things based on what the user is doing with only a small amount of things instead of all this stuff in the world that you would have to take care of, I think.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you sit as a developer and want to implement a piece of code that listens for what the user is doing, why not listen to what the user is doing instead of actually listening to what the web page is doing? Right. And when we go in and say, hey, this element, bubble up a click, and that's not something the user is doing. It's the page saying, hey, I was clicked, come on, do what you need to do. But if they're only listening for what did the user do, that's where you have that differentiation of how the code is actually listening for events.
So, by the way, let's take this. Let's hopefully it doesn't like kill the system, because LinkedIn and Facebook both, like when you look at how many, where was I? Oh yeah, inspect an element. So inspect, and then we say event listeners. So look at how many events. This is why that like I like the visual events tool, because like there's a lot of listeners on this page.
Mm-hmm.
And
again, it's listening for everything everywhere.
yeah.
So yeah.
Now, having said that, when I do this with the visual event tool, I noticed it can take a while to actually load, the thing. I think because there's so many things going on. Granted, though, once it does, it is specific on that field. You can see
of course, it needs to go in and put off all
right.
JavaScript and stuff like that. Yeah.
And this tool, by the way, also, it gets kind of messy because there's so much stuff. Well, you can hit this if you don't think you're on the right one. You can say remove display, and then slowly you can get down to the one that you actually think you're on. What I did was, when I was playing with it, was I used the IWB2 learner tool to see what, like, that Ember 960.self-focused Ember view in the top left, because if I try to move to it, it'll jump. I think this. And I tried to see if those were lined up to make sure I was looking at the right thing. But the other thing, which is what actually, to Jackie's point he was making them a few minutes ago, just think about what it would be. Let me get rid of the visual events. What it would be you'd be doing in this field, right? In this element, you'd be clicking down. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to do a down click, right? Or an up click, or a change, or a keystroke, like a key up. Whatever you think you'd be doing there, that's what I would start with on the event I would send to try to trigger it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only difference is that if you use the extra code that we just showed a bit of a moment ago, is that you're dispatching the event with that element as the ground zero, so to speak, and saying to everything else that, hey, I had an event actually happen here. Whereas with the old method, where you just used the click on it.
Yeah, this one,
yeah, that would instead bubble up in the normal way that JavaScript and other events actually bubble, which just tells the system straight up, hey, this child element actually has a click on it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the exact.
So it still works in that sense. It does it. However, the page isn't listening for that, and so it doesn't actually do anything. Right?
Yeah, it's actually the amount of complexity that whoever made the page chose to use.
Yeah.
And to us, it seems to work great because they programmed something nice. But they, instead of using what the browser and JavaScript and all of that stuff already had built in, they, for some reason, felt they needed to listen in some other way. So
the other one, I'm going to show it here just because it's a fallback too. So Jackie, this is actually, at some point when we were working on it, I saved this because this is what we got to work. Mm-hmm. Right? Was we actually set the value just like we did it when we first started. And then we put a focus, but we copied to the clipboard what we wanted, which here it is. So we copied to the clipboard, and then we blanked the value. I think we focused there, and then this is where you showed me you can send paste after you focus to there. You're interacting with the IE page at that point, not COM, right? Is that what you're doing? And you tell it to focus, and then this part isn't. Well, this is why I don't quite. Because it is obviously that's still you're connecting to that element, I guess, but you're literally sending paste to it.
Yeah. Again, you're using the execute command, which has a lot of code behind it that we don't actually know. But when you do that to the document, the only thing the document does is actually execute that paste on the element that has focus. So that's why we focus a specific place first. But other than that, the execute command then takes care of all of these dispatching of events and all of that stuff. So it's just because it's a workaround to actually making sure the page dispatches all of the events that are needed.
What And I'm just curious. So here we have what we pasted in, but then you use a control to send the enter key, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious. I don't know if we tried this in or not, but is there a way to send the enter key? You know, with this?
Yeah, I believe there is. I just can't remember. I believe it's a number code that you need to
Okay,
send. Yeah.
cool.
I can't remember it. So.
Have you launched it?
But I do remember other stuff where Lexicos and Tank and who not build a lot of code around actually being able to send these enter and other stuff to IE web pages. So I'm not sure what works best, but at least I remember this working back in the day.
Yeah, and that's why I just wanted to bring it up of like, just in case there is another way that's it's still generally speaking better than sending keystrokes. The other way, which is what I was dabbling with, was the whole. I think this is my fine text script. It should pop up here. Here we go. Is I can say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna look for this, and then oh wow, look at this. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'll grayscale it and say, type here. This is just a comment to myself. I'm gonna hit OK, and now when I hit test, it's going to tell me if it found it or not, and if it does, it's going to move the mouse up to there, and then you would just start typing, right? Actually, you'd click first and then start typing. So I'm gonna hit test. So it says OK, so it found it. And now right when I hit OK, see how it moved it right there? That one, I'm like, you know what? It's stupid, but this fine text thing works really well, and I literally can get it done in a minute. So
yeah, this is very useful, or useful enough if the web page is actually visible to you.
Yeah.
And that was the thing with the other stuff, was that you didn't actually want the web pages to be visible.
Excellent point. Yeah. Yep. Because also the speed and everything, and you can't use your computer, when you're running it.
Yeah.
But when you can avoid it, I love not having the having it not even this is actually visible. It's just that it's not taking control of my computer.
Yeah, and some of this stuff also came from, I think, some LinkedIn stuff we were doing, where you had at least an idea of having it having multiple pages open, or tab, or instances open at the same time doing it, and having something that actually needed to visually check wouldn't have worked. So
yeah. What was happening was it was crashing at times, and I was doing some work, and we wanted to be able to not lose everything, so we opened a second browser, or a second tab, and then did some stuff with it. But yeah, that was a long time ago now. But yeah. Cool. Well, let me go ahead. Actually, this is a good stopping point. Let me stop the recording, and then if people have some questions, let me stop recording.